Good stuff. Now let's talk a little college football, though, for real. So spring practice is over. Spring games are over. We've seen it. We've talked to people, all that stuff. But there's a caveat to what I'm asking. We have talked about quarterbacks to death at Ole Miss, and also some with State. You know, how will Will Rogers adjust to the new system, all that. So we are going to talk about, for however long this lasts, what we learned in Oxford, what we learned in Starkville without saying the word quarterback, Will Rogers, Mike Wright, Jackson Dart, Spencer Sanders, Walker Howard. What else besides those things did we learn about these teams over the course of spring? Let's start in Starkville. What have we learned about Mississippi State that doesn't involve Will Rogers?
That they're going to run the football a good bit, and that they've got a number of backs that they feel like they can trust between Marks, Price, Pittman, and Davis. You got guys who can do a little something different. I think Marks is probably the best combination of everything you want there. Davis can be a big play guy. He's got great speed. Pittman is going to be the guy to move the pile. And then Price he might end up being a little bit of the odd man out in this because State is still pursuing a running back in the transfer portal. But you've got four capable guys. You've got an offensive line of guys who, run blocking is in their DNA. They were all recruited by Moorhead to be run blockers or Mullen to be a run blocker. So that system is going to be okay in Starkville. And you're going, and I think we've talked about this before. People talk about this like State's going to the triple I. You heard what Zach Arnett said to me in our interview last week, but it's not. It's still a very pro style. It's going to be still a lot of air raid concepts in the passing game, but they are going to lean on the running game, and in doing so, they won't put. How can I put this? They won't put all of the pressure to win on one position.
Which is refreshing. You didn't say it. I appreciate that. What about defensively? So is Zach Arnett giving up play calling duties? Do we know that for sure?
Yes. He talked about that. He said that, he feels like Matt Brock is a calmer coach than him, basically, that he is a coach. Arnett's a guy that if he gives up a big play, and I sympathize with this from my days of playing Madden and playing NCAA. If I gave up a big play, we were coming all out blitz the next play. I was like, we're getting those yards back. And he said he suffers from that sometimes. He calls it angry blitzing. And he says Brock is a little more calculated in what he does. So he says maybe, we won't get caught with our pants down 2 plays in a row because I've given up an angry blitz. So Brock is in control of that. Davis, obviously Arnett is still there and someone to lean on. But that's Brock's defense, and he'll run it this year.
They did lose some on the front six, but when you look at Mississippi State's front six returning, you got to love what you see. What about the back end, though? A lot of bodies gone there.
A lot of bodies gone there. They've hit the transfer portal really hard in the secondary, and they're going to continue to do so, I would imagine, in these next couple weeks. But, you look at Hunter Washington, Marcus Banks, Jordan Morant, Radar Jones, who won't be here till the summer. But you had guys like Jacoby Albert's already there. I'm missing a guy. Chris Keys from Indiana already there. They've really gone after defensive backs in the portal. So some new faces back there. But Jackie Matthews was a 1-year guy from the portal last year. Colin Duncan was a guy who he had his moments, great in run support, but we know his limits in pass coverage. Jalen Green was the stud back there, the best guy. They're going to have to replace those guys, and obviously have to replace Emmanuel Forbes, too. And that's where Kamari Rogers is probably going to come in.
And hopefully for State, the front six can get pressure and not be so dependent on great coverage on the back end. We'll have to see. Well, we'll turn the page to Ole Miss. Ole Miss, we got a question on the text line. How's Jaden Wally looking?
Fine. He's probably got one of the starting. He's moving outside. So he'll probably end up being a starter with Justin Robinson, at least in the early part of the season, and then they'll see how it goes from there.
We'll start with Bobby in Batesville as we turn the page to Ole Miss. What we learned about Ole Miss that is not related to the quarterbacks, here's what he said. Judkins is an amazing receiver as well as running back and blocker, triple threat. He's going to be insane this year. Ole Miss may easily have the best run game in the SEC with Judkins and Bentley. top 5 in the NCAA if the O-line plays well. Well, they do lead the SEC in rushing. I mean, that's what they do. So that's expected almost. But that is something that the pass catching that I'm curious about. It's a spring game. It's hard to know what it means. However, Quinshon Judkins didn't really play much in the spring game, and he caught 1/3 of the yards that he did all of last season in the spring game. There was a clear point of emphasis to throw the ball to backs out of the backfield, especially in the red zone, which is not something they did a whole lot of last year. Now, it's a spring game. Neither Lane Kiffin nor Charlie Weiss Jr. were calling the plays in the spring game. At least every play. I'm sure they had input because, of course, they did. But that stood out to me. Using the running backs out of the backfield. When you've got a guy like Judkins and then your pair of tight ends like Prieskorn and Trigg, slipping that back out of the backfield while having linebackers and strong safeties having to account for the tight ends can be a deadly weapon. And they didn't use it last year, really. And so if that's what they're going to do, that's interesting. And Judkins looked capable of catching the football. Like, he looked comfortable doing so as well. You know, there are some running backs that have bricks for hands. Not him. At least it didn't look like it. That's something that stands out if they continue to do that. What it'll look like when they're playing real opponents, calling real games, I don't know. But that is something worth taking away from the spring game.
And there's a very strong case to be made for Quinshon Judkins as, I don't know about the best player in college football. No, that's probably too much, but certainly the best running back, and maybe one of the most dangerous players in college football. He is a guy that if you're playing against him, every time he touches the ball, you're concerned that this is going to be a 40-yard run, that this is going to be a touchdown. You know, he has that same, for me anyway, he has that same feeling that I used to have with the Saints when Reggie Bush played. Not that I'm not saying he's going to win a Heisman Trophy or anything. Yeah. I'm just saying that when Reggie Bush touched the ball, I was like, oh, he could go, and it would be a 3-yard gain. But I always had it in my mind, like, he could go. Judkins has some of that too. That, I mean, when he's dangerous when he has the ball.
Yeah, and I've had friends ask me, what's it gonna take for Judkins to win the Heisman? Does he have to run for 2,000 yards? I said, no. Ole Miss has to win 10+ games. That's how.
Well, I mean,
that's what has to happen.
You want me to go ahead and do it right now? Ty Simpson, Kyle McCord, Cade Klubnik, and maybe Blake Corum back at Michigan this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll throw a running back in the mix. Those are your Heisman finalists. I'll just go ahead and give them to you right now here on April 18th.
College football, the best.
Yeah.
We also got a question about Ole Miss getting a punter. Feels like they need him. I know it's a spring game, and they weren't even really live in the kicking game, but not a whole lot of inspired confidence from the punts in the spring game.
State picked up a transfer portal kicker today, so I thought that was interesting because the one field goal they kicked in the spring game was great. 47-yarder, plenty of distance, looked right down the middle. But they went and found another guy today, transfer from William and Mary. Ethan Chang is his name.
William and Mary. I got to see them play at Furman once. I think it was in the playoffs, too. Isn't that where William and Mary's also where Liberty is, right? Isn't that in the same town? Or am I crazy?
I don't think they're in the same town, are they? They can't be.
Two
universities of that size? That would be surprising.
I don't know. We did get asked who behind Judkins will be able to give him a breather. Ulysses Bentley, they hope, can take that step forward. Got hurt last year in the third game. I mean, Zach Evans is not there, and they've got a freshman 4-star coming in. There's a chance maybe they try to add one more in the portal for depth, but if we're being honest, at least I don't think Ulysses Bentley has the upside of Zach Evans. Now, Zach Evans got hurt at periods of time last year as well, but looked explosive in the spring game, looks healthy. They need him to be good because giving Judkins 30-plus carries in multiple games is not something you want to do for a multitude of reasons. So that's the guy, though, that they need to be good. They need to be what they brought him in to be before he got hurt last year. It's Bentley behind him. Also, here's a cop-out answer. You ready for this?
Yeah, sure.
We learned that we don't know anything about Pete Golding's defense. And here's what I mean by that. I was talking to somebody before the spring game, and he was like, I'm really looking forward to seeing what a Golding defense looks like. And I was like, yeah, actually I am kind of curious to see how they line up and stuff like that. They did not show anything. And I mean, spring games don't show you much. They showed you nothing. We're not going to know what their plan is in terms of alignment and personnel and stuff until week 2 of this season. So if you were like me and you were hoping to see, hey, Ole Miss defense, Pete Golding, what's that going to look like? How are they going to line up? Are they going to use 4 defensive linemen or 4 linebackers? All that stuff, all those questions, you got no answers. And that's a cop-out because we're talking about what we learned. We learned that we got to wait until week 2 to see what Pete Golding's defense is going to look like in terms of alignment and personnel because they play Mercer in week 1, and I promise you they're putting nothing on film in that game either. So we'll find out when they go to New Orleans what they're going to do defensively.
So here's a good question then. Did they tackle well in the game?
They weren't allowed to tackle.
Well.
they weren't allowed to tackle. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeesh.
Lane got mad when they did tackle. That's your answer. Yelled on the broadcast when a guy got taken to the ground. So, no idea. It does sound like they're going to have to go portal hunting because just from what you know, I mean, we talked about it yesterday some, but
is Ole Miss going to be able to do that, you think?
See, that's a question, right? Is it, with
No, I was being sarcastic.
Oh, well, but who's available? I mean, it's you feel like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss can get players out of the portal because they have a multi-year track record of getting players out of the portal. But what if the players aren't there that you need, I mean, they need defensive line help. What if there isn't defensive line help? They need linebacker help. What if there isn't linebacker help? I mean, you feel good, or at least they should, about the starters. But what SEC team can have 4 defensive linemen and go through a season not only healthy but effective? None. So they either need guys that are on roster that haven't proven anything to step up in a big way, or else they need to go portal hunting. And you better hope that they're there in the portal to go get. And that's part of the equation too. Interesting.
Yeah,
it is very
because
interesting.
that to me that's everything about Ole Miss this year's defense. Like I look at last year with Ole Miss, and I'm like, how many games did they lose because of offense? 1, maybe. Their problem is they couldn't stop people when they needed to. They couldn't stop LSU. They couldn't stop Arkansas. State probably should have put up 30 on them. If they don't fumble there at the goal line. I mean, Rodgers just played his worst game and still got enough points to win. And then the Texas Tech game, they couldn't stop anybody. Alabama's the only game where you're like, offensively, they had real issues in that game.
Yeah, especially in the red zone. I mean, that's just red zone offense. You can't get past it until it gets better. But, I mean, apparently they're in on some guys. We get a message saying I read that they are trending for 2 top 50 defensive players. They need to land these guys. That is a huge part of this equation. And also the inverse, and this applies to everybody. Now that spring is over, you've got guys that are going to leave your team. Maybe some more than others. But you do have guys that are going to leave your team because they're going to look at spring and they're going to go through spring and realize I'm 3rd on the depth chart. I could transfer to this school and play. I'm going to go do that. That's also something that they've got to navigate. The ever-evolving door of roster management in today's